A man who comes from nothing to become great. A boy in grief becomes a man. At that moment, though, I had more to think about than my position in life as the alpine winds bite my skin. I was a mercenary once, and now that I think about it, I was sorry at how far I'd fell. Penniless, I would have to beg to sit by a fire, much less eat. But first, I would have to find shelter. All other houses were dark, and there were no inns. I saw a few candles lit through the windows of a grand building in the distance. So I ran. I'm not as fast as those Scots, and we people of Italia don't seem to believe in having squires carry our belongings for us. I was a condottiero, but I gave up my armor and horse to run on foot. I ran into the building in search of warmth. To my surprise, the doors creaked open. A massive library. It was warm too. Someone had taken great care to stay warm, and I would have used the books as tinder. Am I not a man of the contract? We pride ourselves on being learned men, the successors of the legions. A young man approached me. "Hello, stranger. Welcome to the University of Florence. Or its library, anyway. You can stay a while. What do you do?" I laughed. I was a condottiero. Now I am old man who wears chainmail. The man smiled and told me he was reading about dukes and princes. He asked me if I knew of any. I said yes, and I began. Once there was a young man who fought under his father, who thought himself worldly and hardened, but in actuality was sheltered and not expecting to be thrust into the world of grief. But then again, no one ever does. And that is how Francesco Sforza went from boy to man. The young man followed my every word with a thoughtfulness in his eyes. He disappeared for a while, then brought some parchment and ink. Oh, and he also brought my two favorite things, salted pork and filone. That can't be the end of Francesco Sforza's tale, could it? He bribed me with delicious food to write his book.
I said no, that was not the end. Francesco Sforza's tale was far from over. My new friend was quite curious to learn of the motivations behind Sforza's deeds, as well as what the man learned in his journeys. I was appreciative of his curiosity because the more questions he asked, the more food he brought me. So Sforza learned politicking from an early age by dealing with his rebellious captains. He stated quite thoughtfully, "It was true. Francesco was not a lord, and he did not inherit his father's retainers. He also inherited a few of his father's contacts, such as Queen Joan of Naples. He served many important people well and grew in fame. This was the time of the Lombardy Wars. The Florentines, Milanese, and Venetians were reaching a boiling point and scrambling to hire out condottieri, such as Sforza. Duke Visconti of Milan hired Sforza, as well as Malatesta. The Venetians hired Sforza's old rival, Carmagnola. Duke Visconti was an ugly man, both in face and character. He was always paranoid and shied away from dealing with people, but had a cruel streak and enjoyed punishing others. Carmagnola once worked for Visconti. The Duke disrespected him at every turn. He used to call us contract dogs. But when Carmagnola acted like a dog and left to join the Venetians for more money, Visconti was furious. He called a man with no loyalties to begin with a traitor. This meant he was more desperate to retain help, and thus Sforza Brigata had greater opportunity for glory and gold. Visconti could be generous to his people and mercenaries who performed well for him, but the failure of his army and the destruction of his heavy cavalry enraged Visconti, as well as his pride in losing to Carmagnola. Malatesta had lost the day, but in his paranoia, he imprisoned Sforza, believing him to have purposely taken too long at defending Pavia to help in Pizzighettone. I made sure my friend took great note when I told him Visconti sent one of the best condottieri in Italy to rot in Milan's dungeons. He had risen to shine very great in his campaigns in Lombardy, but he was again laid low. Visconti freed Sforza after languishing in the dark, much like you freed me from sleeping hungry outside on the dirt in the cold. I could not thank the half-noble man enough. I figured he was somewhat rich. Who else would bring spare salted pork with them to a library? In addition, he must have had quite the upbringing, as intelligent as he was. I still enjoy reading about military tactics, but I never liked reading about dukes and nobles. Only a truly wise man could have the patience for that boring stuff. The Duke sounds like he was generous enough at times to gain the love of his people, but really it seems like they were used to a monarchy and wanted his line to continue. He was cruel, but he still continued to reign. Indeed, the Duke could go from paranoid, imprisoning a man as great as a Sforza, to generous in an instant, offering Sforza the hand of his daughter and thus inheritance of Milan. An issue tormenting Duke Visconti was his line, and he only had his illegitimate child, Bianca Maria. Bianca's mother was the only woman Visconti ever loved, and he had no other children with his wives. He had no son, but given how often noble sons and fathers seemed to quarrel, Sforza ironically became the closest thing to Visconti's son, as well as the closest thing to a prince for the Milanese, who adored him and his gallant and generous army. Sforza would only get the hand of Bianca Maria if he could avenge Milan's loss to the Florentine-Venetian alliance. The Venetians were going to invade Milan once more, and again hired Carmagnola, both for his skill and as an insult to Visconti. It was time for Sforza to redeem himself. The battle was a major victory for Milan, especially for Sforza. After the battle, Sforza rebuilt aqueducts, farms, and houses destroyed by his or Carmagnola's armies. Carmagnola was beheaded in the San Marco Forum for his failure. My savior asked, was Sforza generous to the Milanese in order to gain their love, so he could oust Visconti and become Duke? I told him, I don't think so. Remember, the people still loved Visconti. Francesco was self-serving like most condottieri, but had he killed Visconti, he would rule over a population that hated him. Francesco would eventually get his chance anyway. Visconti died in 1447. This should have meant that Sforza would become Duke, but matters were greatly complicated when Visconti's relatives all lay claim to the riches of Lombardy. Alfonso V of Aragon, Charles of Orleans, Frederick III, Holy Roman Emperor, the Habsburgs. And of course the people did not want a foreign man to rule over them, said my scholar noble, and I nodded yes. The scholars and professors of Milan convinced the people to revert Milan back to a republic. Sforza was immensely popular, and the Republicans gained further support by asking Sforza to become Captain General and reconquer the surrounding towns, who decided to quietly rebel after Visconti's death. The young man asked, Sforza did not wish to force himself over the will of the people, and so he must have been content in his new role. Ha ha ha, I laughed. Content? Sforza might have led an easier life as Captain General than as Duke. They were paying him, and the rest of us, exceedingly well. But yes, if he tried to force himself to be the new Duke, the people would rise up against him anyway. Is it better to be loved or feared? This struck a chord with my friend, and he began to attack the parchment. I continued. Many cities were breaking away, and it was up to the new Captain General of the Golden Ambrosian Republic to rein them in. I don't understand why the Republicans thought making Sforza into their enemy was a good idea. They promised Brescia to him, but they made peace with the city behind his back in the middle of his siege. Brescia stayed independent. Sforza had nothing. I shrugged. The scholar said, if Sforza was more feared, they wouldn't have dared to betray him. The Republicans must have thought he was weak. Sforza had Bianca, the heir to the dukedom, but he didn't pursue it. Maybe they saw it as a sign of weakness. I reminded my friend that Sforza was beloved in Milan, and this would later work to his advantage. The Republicans hated Sforza. The Milanese loved Sforza. Sforza joined with the Venetians to conquer Milan. The Milanese hated Venice. The Republicans were willing to make deals with Venice. The young man and I were plunged into the intricate world of condottieri and dukes and republics and new principalities. So what did Sforza do? His life always has downs, but he finds a way up, the youth said. Sforza had started life as a bastard son of a contract hound. He lost his father and had to grow up quickly to take control of his brigata. Brigata Sforza was a shining star among the mercenary companies, but he was quickly tossed into jail for a single mishap. He had redeemed himself and gained the hand of the daughter of a duke, but was still an unclear heir. After conquering the duchy for the new heirs, the Golden Ambrosian Republic, he was cast out without a town to call his own. Indeed, a good observation. Sforza went to the Venetians for support and decided it was time to conquer Milan for himself. The Milanese did not blame Sforza and instead grew in their hatred of the Republicans. These scholars and professors had made a grave mistake. Sforza began to take city after city with the dubious help of the Venetians. When he marched on Milan itself, the people would not view him as a conqueror, but as a liberator. Sforza was actually invited into the city by the starving people of Milan and practically elected duke with Bianca Maria as his duchess. Sforza had not touched the Milanese countryside and quickly rebuilt any accidentally destroyed farms. He immediately imprisoned the Republicans, but astonishingly, he eventually granted them amnesty. This mercenary, who seemed to only love gold, wrote the Peace of Lodi with Milan's old enemy, Florence. So that is how a private person becomes a public man. I replied, yes, a bastard contract hound becomes the most powerful duke in Italy. So my friend, what are you writing? And what is your name? He replied, I am making a book for princes on how to rule their kingdoms, and my name is Niccolo Machiavelli.
A city of gold is said to be somewhere in the New World, but it is a distant memory now. I looked upon that accursed land with greed, and I lost my eye for it. Our leader is also missing an eye, but he lost it long ago. I am on the brigantine, San Pedro, and I can hear him shouting orders from La Victoria to our side. Francisco de Orellana wears a black eye patch on his face, matched by his black hair, black beard, and high cheekbones. In spite of that, there was many a time he saved us with a precise musket shot during our maddening and catastrophic adventure. We followed him upon this massive river and through a vast jungle, and we will follow him out. We are on the Atlantico now. I did not like ocean travel before, but the smell of salt water is a welcome feeling after smelling only sweat and humidity for almost 2 years. The men sense a storm coming. Don Orellana has asked me to keep a copy of my journal. I do not know why, but it will be a good diversion as we set sail for many weeks. But I cannot continue with the rainwaters pounding on my paper, sweeping away everything I write. So I will go below deck and start at the beginning. January 1541. I have decided to join an expedition to the east as a chaplain. The natives claim there exists a land of cinnamon. Governor Francisco Pizarro, the man who conquered the Inca, calls it País de la Canela. His brother Gonzalo will lead the force, and their nephew Francisco de Orellana, governor of La Culata, is the one who recruited me. Men are eager to join, but they do not talk of cinnamon. They talk of a king who covers himself in gold to show the wealth of his kingdom. And of course, his palace must be gold. His very capital must be made of gold. They say it is called El Dorado. March 1541. It has been 1 month since we left La Culata. Many of our men have commended their spirits to the Lord. Others have run back to Quito. I do not blame them. At least we were heartened by meeting with Pizarro's main force last night. Even among the leaders of our expedition, the tales of cinnamon are beginning to give way to the tales of gold. Orellana spoke of the deserters and the dead. You men who are left, you have the strongest will. Hernan Cortez conquered the Mexica. Francisco Pizarro conquered the Inca. We will conquer El Dorado. We rested in the valley of Sumaco, the farthest east any of us had been. In fact, Orellana is the only man on the expedition familiar with Sumaco. When I looked towards the east at sunrise, I saw an unending sea of green. April 1541. Our men raided a small village today on the foothills of the mountains. Don Orellana came back to camp with a captive, a man named Delicola. Delicola could communicate with our Inca charges and is willing to take us into the depths of this land. He confirms our stories that there is indeed a País de la Canela. When asked about the city of gold, he tells us the land of cinnamon is a province that fuels the riches of El Dorado. He tells us enthusiastically of these territories, almost too enthusiastically. June 1541. This forest is unimaginably large, and I suspect it is bigger than España and New Castile combined. It is easily navigable, however. The lands of the Incas were not suited towards horses yet. Here it is as though the trees have cleared a path for us. We have heard a few tales of Alejo Garcia, a Portuguese explorer whose expedition disappeared approaching this jungle from the east. A few of our allied Inca generals told us about an attack on their southern lands, led by a man similar to us. This man may have been Alejo Garcia. Delicola claims Garcia is still alive, or perhaps his son. September 1541. We are forced to rely more and more on native allies for help. The ones we encounter show great skill in woodworking, building large palisades quite easily. It is clear now that some of the massive trees reaching out from the forest are actually watchtowers, and I can see massive hills in the distance, with smoke and fire coming from them. The trees must have been cleared by them to form roads. We may find this empire of gold after all. November of 1541. I had suspected Delicola of mischief, and unfortunately I was right. He abandoned us a few nights ago, yelling something about besting Pizarro and saving his people from destruction. He must have heard of the conquest of the Inca and thought Gonzalo to be Francisco. Speaking of Gonzalo, we have been separated from him by the river currents. So here we are, stranded with many sick and dying men on our two ships on this sweltering and grand river with the jungle on either side of us. I pray the Lord have mercy upon us and deliver us. Maybe I should pray that the Lord inspired Don Orellana. December 1541. It is hot and humid. It has also been weeks since we last heard from Gonzalo Pizarro. We elected Orellana to be the leader of this expedition. He in turn says our first priority is survival. What good is gold and glory in the face of our Lord? The men must live. The people of the Amara say that a massive sea is at the mouth of the river. Orellana believes this to be the Atlantico, and he has ordered the construction of a second brigantine that will allow us to divide the men and carry enough supplies to sail south, around this continent, and back north towards New Castile. February 1542. Today I held the hand of another one of my comrades as he met with our Creator. Yet the men die of poisoned arrows and fever, but not starvation. Our plan has worked successfully. We sail some distance, then stop and search and repeat. So far, the Indians have gladly traded with us. Eventually, the villages turned to towns, with large temples of wood upon massive hills made of dirt and stone. One of the kings, who called himself Aparia, welcomed us to his capital, though it was not El Dorado. It was there that we built our second brigantine, El Victoria. May 1542. King Aparia warned us it would be much harder once we left his kingdom. His orderly roads and outposts turned to massive wetlands and marshes that melt into the great river. We were also told about the supreme peoples here. Their men and women fight together in battle. I told Don Orellana about this today, and he smirked, recalling the Greek tales of the Amazon warrior women. We see monuments far inland, and the men are tortured by the idea one of them could be a palace covered in gold. One huge structure looms ahead in the distance, seemingly in the middle of the river. Could it be our fabled city? June 1542. The stories were true, and we fought the terrifying women warriors in the shadow of their huge temple. It easily rivaled Coricancha in New Castile. A stray slingstone smashed my face. The Lord took my eye, but he gave us hope as we leave Amazonia. The Amazons were not the rulers of El Dorado, though. I should urge the men to stop thinking of cities of gold or cinnamon, and instead ask them to think of cities of food, paved with tortas, with walls of jamon and rivers of gazpacho. The only way to Ciudad de Alimento now is through the Atlantic. July 1542. We have nearly made it out of this nightmare. The Amazons are gone, but now we have another problem to deal with. Orellana came back from a raid and captured a little girl. She told us about the Negros who eat people. The Amazons wanted our blood, but the Negros will want to eat our flesh. The men are quite disturbed by this. It is one thing to die in war at the hands of a man. It is quite another to be eaten by savages. We have heard yet another story from the locals. A group of Blancos were captured by the Negros. These Blancos clasped their hands together to pray. They had muskets, horses, steel armor, and a large ship that is now destroyed. They must be Spaniards or even Portuguese. Even more fortuitous, they must be soldiers and conquistadors like us with knowledge of shipbuilding. Furthermore, the ocean must be nearby. If we can rescue our fellow Christians, we can make our brigantines seaworthy and fight off any hungry cannibals. August 1542. I have noticed that many of the Indians are beginning to fall ill, and we have seen them burying their dead just like we have for the past year. Surprise attacks have declined as well, but the Negros will be another story entirely. Orellana has ordered us to stop at an island, gather provisions, rescue the prisoners, and then prepare our ships. We may yet leave this accursed forest. It feels like Don Orellana has been shouting orders for 3 weeks straight. My journal is finished, but he is telling the men he is not. Once we return to La Culata, he will search for El Dorado again. He must have asked me to copy my journal to use for future exploration. One copy for him, and one for myself. I want others to read about Orellana and credit him for finding such a strange and dangerous land. He was the first man to explore that massive river and circle around the southern part of the New World, from ocean to ocean. I can only hope his legend will exceed the legends of the fool's gold of El Dorado. I will make sure of it.
My name is Chand Barhai, court poet of the Chauhan dynasty. This is a chronicle of the greatest king of Punjab, Prithviraj Chauhan, and his love Sanyogita of the Gawarwar dynasty. I want to ensure that people will remember the story of my friend. Prithviraj and I were both born in the same year. I believe destiny chose me to be the one to chronicle his story. I will make sure this tale will be passed down through the ages. Prithviraj's courage came from his love. All people are born with the ability to love, though they must learn it at first. The hatred in some men's hearts overwhelms their love, and they become fearful. When we were children, we knew no fear. We were so carefree. I was a child poet assigned to a child prince, and I would accompany him on his adventures. How else was I to write about the life of Prithviraj Chauhan? Even in those days, Prithviraj was a courageous prince, always fighting in battles for his father. The people loved him, and he took great care to help the commoners. He would always ask me to exaggerate his feats, but he was indeed noble. There was one particular adventure, a hunting trip, that turned into a battle against the Solanki king Bhimdev. Listen well, my friends, to my chronicle, to the Prithviraj Raso. Even with the Bhimdev's soldiers hammering at the gates of the temple, Nandini and Pritnani were calmed when they looked into each other's eyes. Love at first sight. We came to learn that Nandini was actually the princess Sanyogita of Kanauj, daughter of Raja Jaichand. Jaichand and Sanyogita's clan, the Gahrawars, hated the Chauhans. It was as if though the two were not meant to be, yet love finds a way. Prithviraj ascended the throne at the age of 20. Our peaceful lives turned to the building of the kingdom. Prithviraj brought Ajmer under direct rule, and it became a twin city of Delhi. I continued to compose my poetry and chronicle his feats, but I also took on the role of an advisor and an ambassador. I would sometimes rule the kingdom, while Prithviraj went and saw his lover Sanyogita in secret. In the days before the Ghurids, the land of 5 rivers was divided by many different rajas. Sanyogita's father, Jaichand of the Gahrawars, ruled one of the most powerful Rajput clans. Another powerful clan was the Solankis, ruled by Prithviraj's old rival Bhimdev. Meanwhile, the fading Ghaznavids continued their raids into the Punjab after being driven there by the men we now call the Ghurids. Let me demonstrate the power of love. Amidst the turmoil, death and battles, Prithviraj never forgot his son Yogita. They would often meet in border towns. There would be occasions in which my Raj would be fresh from a victory, then trot his horse to an enemy town to meet his lover. Some other times would he sleep in the arms of the beautiful young princess and then wake the next morning to march with his men. It was a time of great turbulence, and I will relate to you what kind of storms love had to survive. Prithviraj became the most powerful ruler east of the river Sindh. He had bested Bhimdev and made Jaichand into a jealous vassal. It is strange that another man was born in the same year as Prithviraj and myself, and that man was the feared Muhammad Ghori. We were all reborn at the same time for a purpose. He was a constant shadow upon our backs, an inevitability. Yet Prithviraj saw his marriage to Sanyogita as an inevitability as well. Jaichand was still a formidable foe, even if he was forced to recognize Prithviraj as the strongest Raj. He found out about Sanyogita's meetings with Prithviraj and promptly locked her up in his palace. To make matters worse, he invited the other princes and kings of the land to meet his daughter in a ceremony known as the Swayamvara, so that she may choose to marry one of them. All, of course, except for my own king. Well, Prithviraj was in attendance at the Swayamvara, at least a clay statue of him. Jaichand asked for the statue to be made, and I heard that he laughed when he placed his clay Prithviraj near the front of the palace. What happened next was astonishing. When time came for Sanyogita to choose her husband, she walked past all of the suitors and placed a wreath of garlands over the statue. The headstrong princess allowed Prithviraj enough time to muster a small army and sneak into Jaichand's capital of Kannauj. Of all the plans that a king could make, sneaking into his enemy's city to steal a woman. Love is a funny thing and can cloud the judgment of even the most capable monarchs. The worst part, I did not feel for a second that my Raj would fail in his scheme, which, given the turn of events, may have been poor judgment on my part. Love clouds all. Prithviraj had convinced himself that he could sneak into a heavily fortified city, steal his princess, run through enemy territory, and then defeat the princess's enraged father in combat. He convinced us all that is how love works, and it spread throughout the twin cities of Delhi and Ajmer. Prithviraj and Sanyogita were destined for fall in love. However, there was another destiny to be fulfilled. Muhammad Ghori was coming. Prithviraj had managed to unify most of the Punjab and the surrounding lands just in time to face his equal in combat. A final showdown was coming. Muhammad Ghori was considered to be a conquering hero among the Muslims, while Prithviraj was a chivalrous and dashing champion. Sanyogita's father conspired with Muhammad against my Raj, not realizing that if Prithviraj were to die, Sanyogita would gladly die with him. I accompanied my Raj to the battle site. The village of Tarain was nearby. He asked me to stay next to his brother, Govind Tai, for the bulk of the battle. I did not want to leave him, but he had a sense of foreboding about the upcoming battle. The Ghorids held the city of Bathinda and had a well-fortified camp with their most elite troops to the north. Massive battle lines of over 100,000 men each, this would be cataclysmic. Two virtual equals, two kings of kings, would bring the strongest men of all regions of the Punjab and Persia to bear in one encounter. Could either man live while the other breathes? Would Prithviraj be able to see his beloved Sanyogita? Would love prevail one more time? Despite a valiant effort, my king was captured after the second battle of Tarain. Muhammad Ghori blinded Prithviraj and mockingly challenged him to an archery contest. I visited my king in prison and told him that he must hear the Sultan's voice and make his aim true. Before being put to death, Prithviraj shot an arrow through Muhammad's heart and slew him there. Both men died on the same day. Stricken with grief and defiant to the end, Sanyogita jumped into fires and slowly burned to death to defend the honor of her king. Love is powerful and causes people to do great things. Love never fades away.
"73 years have passed, 73 long years since the horsemen of the White Huns trampled the former eastern border of Persia like a swarm of locusts, ambushed our beloved Shah, and then plundered the heartland of the empire. Their advance was barely stopped with the help of the local nobility. Afterwards, our weakened empire had no choice but to give in to the outrageous annual demands of tribute imposed by the White Huns. Now, 73 years later, Khosrau, the grandson of the slain Shah, is ready to take revenge for this eternal shame cast upon his family's name. His family is the renowned dynasty of the Sassanids, rulers of one of the greatest empires that ever existed, and having done so for several centuries now. In the meantime, on the western border, our other arch-enemy, the Byzantines, will have to wait until the threat of the East has been dealt with. An uneasy peace treaty with them has given us time to deal with the White Huns, and so Khosrau has told his generals to go to all four corners of the empire and gather the support of every man and family in the empire. But even with an army that could fill the space between the Zagros and the Alborz mountains, Khosrau knows that the White Huns are a foe not to be underestimated. The only way to be sure of victory would be to ally with another enemy of theirs, the Gokturks. These nomads from lands hardly known to civilized men hate the White Huns just as much as we Persians do. The Gokturks live in harsh conditions and are trained to fight on horseback just as well as the White Huns, and their arrows will not easily miss their targets. As I mount my heavy armored horse and hear the earth tremble under the weight of my fellow Savaran horsemen, riding east to meet our Shah Khosrau, a pleasant but ominous thought comes to mind. Our Shah Khosrau would soon show the world that the Persian Empire is still a force to be reckoned with. He would show the White Huns that the Sassanids would not stand for the disgrace cast upon them, and will wipe the White Huns off the face of the earth. The White Huns possessed great military power, but their lack of organization made them unable to fight on multiple fronts. When we Persians and our allied Turkish tribes launched our two-pronged attack, the White Huns were quickly defeated. The mighty, heavy-armored Persian cavalry and swift, accurate Turkish horse archers crushed the disorientated enemy within 8 days. The victory at the Battle of Bukhara was of great significance to us, for the White Huns faded into history, and the Gokturks and Persians ended up dividing the conquered land among themselves. The great endeavors of our great emperor, Khosrau, have restored Persia to its former glory. There's an old tale told by our village elders here on the Yucatan Peninsula. Although almost faded, it has managed to survive for so long and lives on through us as it's passed from one generation to another. Our hunters often return from their hunts, and they describe massive stone man-made mountains and carved images of gods and strange people. It tells us that the tale is true. At night, I join the others around the campfire, and when our village elder starts telling the tale, I can hear my own heartbeat racing. A long, long time ago, during the time of kings and gods, he starts. From that moment, I imagine myself as a character in the story, as if the story was my own. A long, long time ago, during the time of kings and gods, two great cities, Tikal and Calakmul, reigned over Yucatan. Tikal had engaged itself in a war with Calakmul, also known as the Serpent Kingdom, after the great serpent god. In order to secure the jade and cacao trade, Tikal founded the city of Dos Pilas in the Pitex Batun region, and the old king, Kinich Muan Jol II, sent his younger son, Balaj Chan Kawil, to rule it. The older son, Nun Ujol Chak, was to rule over Tikal itself. Balaj Chan Kawil, however, was jealous of his older brother and wasn't pleased with the smaller city of Dos Pilas that he was given. Over time, the war god, Buluk Chaptan, planted seeds of resentment and hate in him. He was convinced that he would be a better ruler of Tikal than his brother. The king of Calakmul, Yoknum Cheen II, invaded Dos Pilas and managed to take Balaj Chan Kawil captive. He gave the young prince a choice, either to be sacrificed to the gods or to betray his brother and become a vassal of Calakmul. Balaj Chan Kawil, jealous of his brother, recognized Yuknum Cheen II as his overlord and agreed to fight against Tikal. However, he also started fighting for his own power and the glory of Dos Pilas instead of just that of Calakmul. At the end, the outcome of the war was inconclusive. Balaj Chan Kawil betrayed his father and brother by sacking Tikal, but he never became the true king of the city. Instead, struck by guilt, he went back to Dos Pilas and spent the remainder of his days there. The war was won by Tikal after several years. Nonetheless, it never really recovered from the betrayal of one of its dearest sons. "Itchik," I hear a strange but familiar voice saying, "Itchik, wake up." When I finally open my eyes, I see my sister in front of me. "You've fallen asleep again, brother. Everyone is already to bed." Slowly, I get up and walk with my sister to our hut. On the way there, I say to her, "When I grow up, I want to go hunt like our father and brothers. I want to see these stone mountains and see where Balaj Chan Kawil reigned with my own eyes." Shouts of approval rang around the great hall after the sons of Ragnar finished speaking. Ravens flew upwards, eager to tell the Aesir of the good tidings, no doubt. Moments later, the ravens called down, and the sky flashed with lightning and boomed with thunder, signaling their approval. Reveling in the favor of the gods, the immense crowd of warriors began a feast. Days later, the mustering began. Kings, jarls, huskarls, berserkers, and common folk alike had gathered, all answering the call of Ragnar's sons. Great and proven warriors they were, and eager for vengeance for the dishonorable slaying of Ragnar by the Northumbrian king Aella. Ragnar's son Ivar has sworn to carve the blood eagle on Aella in retribution for his actions. The scene of preparation for the departure of the army was quite a sight to behold. Hundreds of longships assembled with full crews of good Norsemen, and enough supplies were loaded on board to last the army months, the best of all the Northlands, preparing for the great battle of their age. Odin's hall would soon be swelling with new warriors, for his Valkyries would no doubt be eagerly observing the campaign. Ragnar's sons approached a small company of the warriors gathered with an important quest: to scout the British Isles and establish a camp suitable for the army to use as a base from which to attack the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. As a skald, I was tasked with doing what I have always done, recording the great exploits and triumphs of my fellows and compiling a saga that will be passed down from generation to generation. Thor was pleased with us, for the seas were benign and the winds favorable, allowing our 5 ships a serene passage west from Scandinavia. We had knowledge of 4 great Anglo-Saxon kingdoms: Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex. York, the seat of Northumbria, was our target, but it would be imperative to avoid being spotted and keep the element of surprise. Even after making camp, we would need to await our army. Odin and Thor have willed us to glorious success. Over the past several months, I have seen more gold, more riches, and more carnage than I could possibly have dreamed of. The smell of smoke is still inundating, to say the least. These people surely must think that they have been struck by the hand of the god that they have tried to force on us time and time again. Our gods are stronger. True to their word, Ragnar's sons carved the blood eagle on the back of the cowardly Alla as a warning to the Northumbrians, and laughed at the knowledge that Ailla's weakness doomed him to eternal scorn in Niflheim, for Odin has no place for cravens. The haughty Anglo-Saxons have met their match in our glorious force, for we have easily cut a broad swath through their land. The treasures we have seen are without equal, and the land is fertile and rich. With the locals all but conquered, I think we will stay here a while. Ivar, Bjorn, Sigurd, and Ube all desire to carve out kingdoms in this fruitful location, and I am excited at the prospect of continuing to chronicle their deeds. I do believe that I have come up with a fitting title for this legendary saga: The Tale of Ragnar's Sons and the Age of the Vikings. Are you still working? Why do you work so much? The young Romanos asked his father, who was sitting in his dark workroom next to a candlelit table. Constantine smiled and answered, "The life of an emperor is very busy. The Byzantine Empire is big and strong, but it does not function just by itself. Problems always occur that you have to solve in order to keep everything in order. You will see for yourself later." "Are you writing laws?" asked Romanos, pointing at the large book lying in front of his father. "No, I am compiling all of my knowledge and experience about governing the empire in a book for you and the next generations of emperors to come." "That is interesting," Romanos observed. "Can I have a look?" Constantine smiled again. "You should be in bed now, but after all, I am writing it for you. Come here. For an empire as grandiose as ours, deft diplomacy is vital. To make your empire survive and thrive, you always have to know with whom to maintain peace and whom to conquer. To make such decisions, you have to know the surrounding peoples well and understand their culture and history. Right now, I am writing about a very interesting group of people. They are called the Hungarians, but are also known as the Magyars. They live in Central Europe near the Danube River, yet their language and customs are utterly different from those of other Europeans. They are pagans, not Christians, and have a very warlike nature. They are fierce warriors who fight from horseback and master the skill of archery. With their constant raids all over Europe, they have caused many problems for the feudal rulers. "Why are they so different? Where did they come from?" inquired Romanos. "They came from as far as the Ural Mountains in Asia. There you could still meet their relatives who speak similar Ugric languages. Originally, they were a nomadic pastoral people, but climate change and the appearance of the aggressive Pechenegs forced them to migrate westward. After a long and arduous migration, they reached the Carpathian Basin. It would seem that they are a resilient people if they manage to survive such hard times and still claim a new homeland," observed Romanos. "Yes, and today the entirety of Europe is experiencing that toughness. They have conducted several raids into Byzantine lands as well. But why did they turn against us, and why is it so difficult to defend against them?" Romanos asked. "Well, this is diplomacy. You still have a lot to learn. Secondly, it is their sly tactics that makes them so difficult to deal with. They wear light armor, which makes them highly mobile. They launch their attacks without warning, raid the countryside, and leave quickly before a defensive force can be mustered. If they are forced to fight a pitched battle, then they prefer to avoid melee combat. They feign a retreat instead, and then cast a rain of arrows at their pursuers. Their preferred weapons are the scimitar, lances, and the dreadful recurve bow. This is terrifying. Will anyone be able to stop them, or will they conquer Europe? I am sure that sooner or later someone will defeat them. Their tactics are already known. They will have to adapt to European customs or else disappear from the map," the wise emperor concluded, snuffing out the candles. 10th century, the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period in medieval China. The land is once again in turmoil. In the far east, near the sea, there is the small coastal state of Wuyue, advanced in science and culture. Due to its wealth, it has given its ruler, Qianlu, the opportunity to attack Wuyu's bigger and stronger neighbor, the state of Wu. Wu is a military powerhouse and hated by the other states, so Qianlu aims to destroy his enemy and secure its military power for himself. Success will ensure eternal glory for the king and his people, and a chance at reuniting China. Defeat will mean the end of the Wuyue state and its great ruler. The invasion is to take place near the Langshan, or the Wolf Mountain, on the northern shores of the Yangtze River, where the Wuyue Navy under Prince Qian Yuanguan has quickly built a fleet of small war vessels, having modified fishing and trade ships. The Wu, however, got word of the river invasion and have sent their best commander, Peng Yanjiang, to protect the river at all costs. Resources in this war-plagued land are scarce, and technology and innovation will prove to play an important role in the upcoming battle. Outnumbered and in hostile territory, Qian Yuanguan will need to be creative and work quickly in order to succeed. Aside from technology, the prince will also have to rely on the support of the locals to obtain more supplies for his navy. Therefore, Qianlu has ordered his son to sail down the river to a lake on whose shores he plans to build a grandiose temple. If he succeeds in building it, the temple will show the people of Wu the might of the Wuyue, and the ruler of Wu will quickly lose his support among his military leaders. While small rays of sun dance on the steady and calm Wolf Mountain River, shouts are heard in the far distance. If silent, one can hear them cry. Enemy ships sighted. Soon the river will turn red. Qian Yuanguan used various tactics during the battle. He ordered his men to throw ashes into the faces of the enemy sailors and to use sand to protect the decks of their own ships from fire. Later, after his ascension to the throne, he was named Wenmu, or Civil and Solemn. King Wenmu's use of gunpowder to ignite his flamethrower's oil and burn the enemy fleet is the first recorded use of the explosive mixture for military purposes. Although not a decisive end to the Chinese Civil War, this battle is probably the most important event of its time and changed the future of the entire world. The wind whispers a faint melody as it glides through the mountain trees, while the footsteps of soldiers and the creaking of a rolling cart provide the fitting harmony. The pass has a forbidding aura to it, for it is so thin that only 30 men can walk abreast, a narrow corridor perfect for trapping a force in an ambush. And yet there is a peaceful feel to it that calms the nerves of the troops that form Minamoto's vanguard. Trudging through the pass, the common soldiers groan as a deluge is unleashed, turning the once firm earth into a treacherous sea of mud. The samurai alone are silent, being battle-hardened veterans to whom the concept of pain is foreign. Their honor is their prime concern, and right now it rests on the success of their mission: to deliver supplies to the besieged city of Kurikara, a bastion that guards a choke point vital to this war. After years of oppression and anger at the decadence of the imperial court, the Minamoto clan declared its open opposition to the dominance of the wicked Taira, splitting Japan into East and West. Lord Minamoto no Yoritomo holds the Minamoto heartland to the east, while his cousin Yoshinaka holds the frontier. Throughout 2.5 years of war, the Tyra have steadily advanced, rarely seeing defeat thus far. Their armies advance quickly in a three-pronged assault on Kurikara in an attempt to take the heavily defended pass that has slowed their progress east. In addition to erecting 4 massive siege camps, the Tyra have captured the lighthouse at the point of the Noto Peninsula, controlling naval passage in and out of the Toyama Gulf. Entourages of samurai patrol all roads to Kurikara, and enemy supply lines reach all the way to Kyoto. This will be the decisive battle of this war. If Kurikara falls, there will be nothing to stop thousands of Taira samurai from flooding into the Minamoto heartland, assuring a swift victory. But if Kurikara holds and the grandiose Taira samurai troop is defeated, then the tide of the war will turn, and Yoritomo will be able to bring the fight to the gates of Kyoto and to the imperial palace itself. Thunder boomed as spears of lightning pierced the sky, mingled with the cries of battle. Driven back from the walls of Kurikara, the Taira army had been in steady retreat as Minamoto no Yoritomo led droves of Minamoto and Hojo samurai to victory after victory. Smoke rose from the Taira siege camps and floated with the wind towards Kyoto, an ominous shadow of doom approaching those inside the city. Offering thanks and prayers to the gods, Yoritomo advanced, halting and making camp outside Kyoto. For days, siege engines pounded the walls of the imperial city, reducing its great castles to piles of rubble. As the main gate fell, Minamoto clansmen poured into the city, killing all in their path, while Yoritomo strode triumphantly to the imperial palace. Entering it, he slew the royal guards stationed there and planted his banner. With the power of the Taira broken and their capital taken, the war turned in Yoritomo's favor. In one fell swoop, he seized 1/3 of the Taira dominion and turned a doomed rebellion into a triumphant affair. It would take 2 more long years, but Yoritomo's prowess as a commander ensured victory at the Battle of Donnoura in the year 1185, ending the Genpei War and ushering in the new era of the Kamakura shogunate. Who would not have heard the name of Richard I of England? Better known as the Lionheart, he remains an iconic figure in England and France. Despite being a legend, he really was a controversial person. Some say he was a bad son, a bad husband, and a bad king, but a gallant and splendid soldier. During his reign of 10 years, he did not spend more than 6 months in England. He was not an Englishman either. He was French, a Plantagenet, and did not even speak English, but a dialect of French. He used his kingdom, England, as a source of revenue to support his armies. Moreover, he had a rash personality that was frustrating at times, and therefore he often conflicted with his allies. But how did he manage to earn his fame and become a legend despite all this? His contemporaries saw him as a true hero, and this image remained until today. He was a brave individual warrior, a skilled military leader, and a righteous person. He poeticized and enjoyed playing chess. Exemplifying all of the knightly virtues, he was a true knight king, the first of his kind. He established his repute by taking part in the Third Crusade. The crusade was launched because in the year 1187, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt, conquered Jerusalem, the holy city of the 3 major religions. Richard allied with Frederick Barbarossa, Holy Roman Emperor, and Philip Augustus, King of France, to conduct a crusade against Saladin to reclaim Jerusalem for Christianity. Of the latter two, Barbarossa was known as the other most soldierly ruler in Europe at the time. When the campaign was launched, Barbarossa chose to travel to the Holy Land by land, while Richard and Philip traveled by sea. They met in Sicily, but the tension between the two rival kings was obvious. Richard's way through the Mediterranean Sea to the Holy Land was as adventurous as one would expect from someone called the Lionheart. The conquest of Cyprus was more important strategically than it seems. It became a naval base from which the eastern Mediterranean could be controlled in addition to the ports of the Holy Land. Having conquered Cyprus, Richard set sail towards the Holy Land and finally arrived. There, he soon had to face the fact that he was left alone to conduct the crusade. Frederick Barbarossa had drowned in a river, and Philip Augustus turned back to France, having claimed illness. Despite his own serious illness, Richard captured the city of Acre, breaking a siege with which the German and French Crusader armies had been struggling for 93 weeks. After recovering from his disease, he faced his great counterpart, Saladin, who was no less noble than Richard himself. During the rest of the crusade, the two faced each other in several battles, most of which ended in victories for Richard. Most notable was the Battle of Jaffa, where with only 2,000 foot soldiers and 54 horsemen, he managed to rout an army of 7,000 Muslim horsemen. In this battle, he proved that he was the greatest strategist of his time. His success even extended to the capture of Jerusalem, but he did not have enough military force left to hold it. The Third Crusade ended with a treaty between the two great opponents, Saladin and Richard. Just as sun rises in the east, so did the hordes of Mongolia out of the steppes of the east. Their empire now stretched as far as Anatolia, where refugees of the fallen Eastern Turkish empires started occupying Byzantine land. Even the mighty Seljuk Empire was gone, and the Rum Sultanate and other minor kingdoms in Anatolia were the only kingdoms left in Turkish hands. At this moment, Osman, a young member of a Turkish tribe, became aware of the opportunity that lay ahead of him. With many of the neighboring powers gone or busy fighting the Mongols, while the Byzantine Empire in the west was slowly crumbling, he knew that he had to strike the iron while it was hot. Son of a Turkish bey, he had followed his nomadic family to this new fertile place in former Roman lands. Now that he had grown up, he took his father's place and became a bey himself. He was unmatched in physical strength, and therefore got the name Bone Breaker. But Osman had more than just his strength. Soon he offered his services to the Rum Sultan and started dreaming of an empire of his own. His successes as a commander quickly spread, and Persians, Arabs, and Turks, all fleeing the Mongol onslaught in the east, wanted to join under his command. Still, the way was long, as Osman had to start almost from scratch in a place surrounded by rivals and hostile tribes. Not to mention the Byzantines, who were now relying on aid from their Christian brethren to the west. There had been some rumors about a former Knight Templar who was bringing a Spanish army to aid the old Byzantine Empire, but Osman wasn't worried about mere rumors, as he knew his carefully crafted out plans would succeed. He would be the beginning of something that would determine the course of history for centuries to come. With the first successes of Osman came the first Ghazi warriors from the east, and after years of successful expansion, his small band of warriors quickly grew into a mighty army. Rich cities which had been in the hands of the Byzantines for almost a millennium fell to the Turks of Osman. The only one who stood in his way was Roger de Flor, the former Knight Templar and later Condottiero, and his Catalan company. He was a genius commander and the only real rival for Osman. Several times did he manage to defeat the Turkish armies, and even almost drove them out of Anatolia. But just at the moment he was to succeed, old politics and internal Byzantine feuds got the best of him. Roger de Flor was treacherously killed by the same empire he had fought so hard to defend. When hearing the news of his death, his loyal Catalan company started devastating the Byzantine lands, and afterwards left for home with the body of their commander. Osman had always respected his great rival, whom he believed to be his equal, but Roger's death opened the way for his ambitions, and soon his men conquered the lands around Sogut. Just before he died, Osman looked west across the Bosphorus and even prepared the invasion of Europe for his successors. Osman died as a satisfied man, for he had created his own empire. He had founded the Ottoman Empire,